Hello, welcome to Who's On Next, the podcast where we just come up with openers for the podcast. Today I have with me a man who's had a very, very prolific voiceover career the last several years with things such as Gorilla Grodd on The Flash and other DC projects. He was in Injustice as Dr. Fate. He was Shockwave in Transformers Prime. It is David Sobolov.
Hello.
Oh, how are you doing today?
I am groovy. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm just sitting here alone with my dog in my office because there's no one
Oh,
else
nice.
home, so he has to be in here.
I love dogs. What kind of dog do you have?
He's King Cocker, I think is what he's called, the King Cocker Spaniel.
I've never. Oh, Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah.
King Cocker. I'd never heard of that as a dog.
I just say that because it's quicker to say than just Cocker Spaniel. I think that's the type of breed he is. I know he's a Cocker Spaniel, but I think it's called like a King's Cocker or like a Kingsman Cocker Spaniel.
It kind of sounds like a snake when you say it that way.
What, a King Cocker?
Yeah.
So like a King Cobra, a King Cocker?
Yeah, like something that would attack you in the forest or something.
Oh, King Charles, that's what they're called. King Charles Spaniel is what they're called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just looking up to remember if that's what he was called.
Cool.
Do you have any dogs? Like any big dogs?
I don't currently. I used to have dogs. I'm going to have dogs again, but not right now.
Mm. Were you ever like a big dog person or like a small dog person?
I like both, but mostly big dogs. I had a lab at one time. I had a purebred Scottish Terrier when I was a kid. So that's pretty small.
Yeah, I've only ever really had small dogs. There were big dogs that my parents had when I was like 1 or 2, but I didn't really like. They passed away before I really knew them. So
Mm-hmm.
now, ever since, I've just had small dogs. I had a pug. I had a Boston Terrier. I've had this dog currently. Never
I had
really
a small
like,
pit bull for a while. He was awesome.
never had big ones really.
Yeah, my small pit bull was sort of small but mighty. He was 50 pounds. I thought of him as small, but other people thought he was big.
It's like my sister has a Malamute, like a
Those
big dog. But
are huge.
she acts like a small dog. That's the scary thing is that so she'll just run in, being like 100+ pound dog, like running through different rooms.
You should try to land on your lap. Just she'll sit on your lap.
Oh, she tries to jump sometimes, and we tell no, you will take me down if you try to jump on me.
Hmm.
Anyway, I guess we'll just get this started. So, what is it that got you interested into doing acting?
I had a mom who was a singer in the 40s, so her career was kind of interesting to me. So that kind of got me curious about it. And then later on, people would hear my voice and go, "You should do voice acting. You should do voice acting." And after a while, I would rather just do it than be told I should do it. And that got me into it. But I studied acting and went to the neighborhood playhouse in New York and studied with Sanford Meisner, who was kind of a famous teacher back in the day. And never really thought of doing voice acting. An agent saw me doing a play and said, "Come do villains," and it worked out.
So it was literally just they heard your voice in a play and they were like,
Yeah, come do villains. And you kind of, for a while, I mean, when you're younger, you have something that interests you. Like I was a French horn player, I was a singer, I did all sorts of stuff in the arts. I really just wanted to make a living at it, something in the arts where I could just be sustained and not have to do anything else. And voiceover seemed to be what it was. It's where they were willing to pay, and also it was a lot of fun. And another great thing about voiceover is that you could play all these different characters, and it doesn't matter what you look like. You don't have to look like the character, so you're not restricted to a certain type.
"Oh yeah, no, I've always loved the creative freedom that you can have as a voice actor that you really can't have as an on-screen actor." I think Mark Hamill said this is that you can do things you would never do on screen comparatively to
Mm-hmm.
do something in a voiceover project.
Well, Meisner always said that acting is living truthfully under given imaginary circumstances, and there's nothing more imaginary than animation or video games.
And do you like what was it like when you got your first voiceover project? I mean, was it weird at first having to figure out all the logistics of it, or did you just kind of get
Yeah,
into it?
I never thought of it as weird, and there really aren't that many logistics. It's not really a big like mystery thing. I could teach anybody in 10 minutes technically what they need to know to do voice acting. It's the acting part that matters. And the idea that it's not about doing voices. When I started really playing characters and not just doing voices, I booked a lot more, because you got to get into the humanity of these characters, even if they're comedic, even if they're crazy voiced characters, they're still telling a story.
Right, and interestingly, you started out doing voiceover in Canada.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up in Canada, lived there, and started doing. Well, I did some in New York when I lived in New York years ago, but then I moved to Edmonton and Vancouver. And my very first professional voice acting jobs were for radio plays in Canada. And then I moved to Vancouver and started doing some cartoon stuff there. And first big show I did was called Vortec, and it was on Fox. Probably no one remembers it. It was just 12 episodes in 1995 or 96. That's kind of the first thing I did. It was always for the U.S. market, so we were being seen in the States, which helped a lot when I wanted to move to Los Angeles, because they already knew who I was.
Right, yeah, and I think it was, and Beast Wars wasn't long after that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was Beast Wars, there was Robocop, Spider-Man Unlimited, Sabrina the animated series. I did all those in Vancouver, and that really opened the door for me in the year 2000 to move down to L.A.
What was okay with RoboCop? Was that like how was that process like? Was that like, did they tell you to do like a Peter Weller type voice, or did they have you do like your own thing for it?
I did my own thing, but the funny thing was that they didn't really want me for it at first. It was a scratch roll. And when I was doing the episodes, they pay you a very small amount of money, and you're a placeholder until they can find their celebrity. And you could hear them in Los Angeles. We were in Vancouver, but you could hear them on the line. Like, can you sound like this guy? They were like they were having like people listening in on the sessions. And after 7 episodes, I either couldn't find anybody, or they couldn't find anybody who would work for what I would work for at the time. So they let me keep the role.
So they originally were going to try to get like a bigger person and just.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely. I'm sure they just wouldn't work for scale, so they had to keep me.
I'm surprised.
It was great that they did.
I'm surprised they couldn't just get Peter Weller. He was never that much of an A-list actor. I'm surprised.
Yeah, but it's a large time commitment, and a lot of celebrity people that do films, they don't really have the time to devote to it. A lot of them do it now, but they sometimes run into trouble because they get busy schedules and they can't get them back.
Yeah, because I think Peter Weller's also a teacher in LA. I think that's what he was doing for a while, because I think he retired from acting for like a decade.
Oh, okay.
Or something like that. So I don't know, maybe he was busy doing that.
We've never met. I do not know.
Now, I guess interesting thing with Beast Wars is that you've prominently kept staying involved in Transformers projects, at least in the last like 10 years, with Transformers Prime and Bumblebee and things like that.
Yeah, that was a great treat. You know, you think you get one big role in a lifetime for Transformers, and I've had 3, so lucky me.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting because I've interviewed people like I've interviewed some people who worked on like Digimon, and they've been on like every different Digimon show, and I just always found it funny because I'm just like, after a while it almost feels intentional, like when they're on like every different version of the show, and then they'll just be like, nah, it was just a big coincidence that I've happened to be on every different variation of this franchise or things like that in some way.
Well, I certainly didn't get on every variation, just these 3, and it was totally random. None of them had anything to do with the other one.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying I've just always found that interesting. I think the only one that was intentional from what it sounded like was when I spoke to Jim Meskimen with about Thundercats, because he was one of the character designers for the original Thundercats, and I remember he had said anytime he would audition for something on Thundercats, he would just kind of casually throw in, I helped design these characters, and he would always get like a little Easter egg roll or something on a Thundercats project because of that.
I don't find that it really helps much usually.
Yeah, no, I just always thought that was really funny whenever he's brought that up.
The don't you know who I am thing.
Yeah, no.
But Jim's a great guy. Jim's a great guy, and his mom was on Happy Days.
Oh yeah, no, we
Marion Ross.
Yeah,
that was so cool when I got to work with her on Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, this is somebody I watched on TV when I was a little kid. And there she is standing next to me in the studio playing a villain.
Yeah, if I remember, I think I looked into it. I think that she retired not long after that. I think that was like one of the last things she did, acting wise. Yeah,
Well, it
because I
was
think
great work. Great to be able to work with her. What a treat.
yeah, because I think she retired like a couple years ago. I think that was one of the last things she did.
I think she was 86 when she did that.
God, that's it's so crazy to me when I hear about actors like still doing stuff like that, like when they're like 95 or things like that.
Well, and I was standing next to her, and it's like, Ms. Ross, would you like to sit down? We have a few hours. No, 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 dear, I'll just stand. She didn't sit at all. Can I get you some water? Can I get? No, I'm good. She was just working. She was there to work. I was very impressed.
Oh man, well it's like June Foray. Up until she died, I think she was still doing voiceover at like 98, like 97, 98 years old, and it amazes me the commitment some people have, even when they're like pushing 100 years old, to do acting or voiceover or things like that.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to pursue voice acting is because I could do it when I'm old. There's no retirement date. And now, frankly, with COVID, it forced all of us to get really good home studios if we didn't already have one. So, I've got the Neumann mic in my booth now, and I've got the Apollo Box X, which is like a really great interface. I sound like I'm at Warner Brothers. I'm on a phone now, but if I was on my actual system, I can do all this stuff from home. So I could be not very well, maybe 90 years old, and as long as I could still read and hobble over to my booth, I could still work. And I found with people that a lot of times people have to keep doing something. You have to keep doing something. You can't just retire when you're 65 and sit there. It's not a satisfying life for most people.
I remember I watched a documentary about Mel Blanc, and I think he had said like his parents had retired in their 70s and they got bored being retired, so they like opened up a shoe shop or something like that. like something like that.
That's great. Well, and life expectancies are longer now, and you can expect to live at least to your 80s usually.
Right.
So I'm not going to sit around for 20 years and do nothing.
Right. I remember talking to Jack Angel, I interviewed him 2014, I think, and he's like 91 years old now, and he's still doing voiceover. Like he's been doing it since the 70s.
Well, Frank Welker, he was in Transformers Prime with me. He's a fantastic guy. He started working, was it the 50s? But it was the 60s at least. And he started on Scooby-Doo in like 1968, 69, still doing it.
Say that man, Frank, the level of commitment Frank has had, and just the amount of the most he's gotten to the point where he's debatably one of the most prolific voice actors of all time.
He is, and the nicest. He's so nice. He's like so polite and so sweet and goofy. And you should see him with Peter Cullen when there was a break. He would just be riffing. They would be doing a comedy routine. It would be like seeing these two polished comics sitting there doing a show for you.
It's actually really weird. I remember watching a movie a few months ago from like the 60s, and it was before Scooby-Doo. It was like 65, 66 or something like that. And I noticed one of the side characters in the movie. I'm like, oh my God, that's Frank Welker. He was like, it's like an old Disney movie with Kurt Russell or something. I forget what it was called, but like.
Oh, was he in the computer wore tennis shoes?
Yes, that's what it was. That's what it was. It's like
I'll have to go back and look at that again.
Yeah, he plays like one of the students. He's not a main character. He's like a side character, like like Kurt Russell or something like that. But it was just really weird seeing him show up in that.
Neat. Well, everybody started somewhere.
Yeah, no. I guess one of the interesting things I've always noticed is that you've been doing a lot of comic book related stuff, because there's been The Flash and there's been Injustice, and I mean you've been doing Gorilla Grodd since The Flash, which I think was 2014.
Yeah, we started in 2014.
Yeah. And I guess, were you ever like a big comic book person, or was that never like really a thing that interested you? It's just...
I was into Warner Brothers stuff. I wasn't into comic books. I only read Mad Magazine when I was a kid. That was my thing, because I was like politics and there was lampoon things. Yeah, I I like Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny cartoons from the 19. I like the older the better. Like, you ever heard of that song that I don't know if it's Warner Brothers. It's called "I Want to Singa." It's about
Oh,
this
oh my
little
God,
owl.
that
That's my
that
favorite thing. It's great.
that short for for me and my dad, that short is like one of our favorite things on the planet because it always makes us laugh. Is that one short?
It's pretty memorable. I think that was 1936 or something like
I
that.
think it was a Tex Avery short. I'm pretty sure it was Tex Avery.
So when I was a kid, I was trying to find the oldest stuff from the 30s and 40s, really old Popeyes, which they still showed on TV in the 70s, believe it or not. They for a while, like later on, they got rid of anything that was black and white, but early on, before high def TV, they still showed a lot of stuff. I even remember when I was a little kid, we had a station that probably didn't have a lot of money, and they would just air really bad prints of things. And there was a sitcom from 1952 called Our Miss Brooks that was on every afternoon, and it was, you would never see that on a TV screen today. It's just too old, and there's horrible prints of it. They didn't care. You could barely see it, barely hear it, but they aired it. And that was so cool to see. When you were a little kid, it was just fun for me. Weird that I liked old stuff, Ben. I've always liked old stuff. Always.
Oh yeah, no, I had an old VHS tape. It was like 3 or 4 shorts. It was a Daffy Duck tape. I had a Felix the Cat tape, and I watched that Daffy Duck tape so much. I think it's the one tape that I watched so much that it actually died with how much I watched it. Like it had gotten so faded to the point that there was not even any color on it anymore. It had a few. There was an old, again, the old Felix one. I think there was a Popeye one. I know I had a Woody Woodpecker one.
I've got a few of the old 8 millimeter films too, but I've never been able to watch them.
Oh, you actually have like the film strips.
I've got the old film. I've collected a few of those over the years, but who knows if they'd even play anymore. They might just fall apart if I put them in a projector. But yeah, I've talked to some people that have those projectors, but we've got to make the arrangement. COVID happened, and then we never got together, but we will.
I know that there's people that can also like digitally put that stuff like on. I don't know how they do it, but there's a way that they can convert like film strip into like a digital file or something like that.
I might try that at some point.
Yeah, I don't know how, but I know that there are like people that can convert them like onto a digital format. Because I remember I had a friend who used to do that kind of stuff. They would take like old VHS rips and they'd be able to put them on film digital format, and they were able to find a way to do it with film strips because they did it with an old Woody Woodpecker short.
I bet those survive better than VHS tapes. You know, people have to watch that. If their VHS has been sitting in a closet somewhere, it's been hot, it gets warped, and then it won't play anymore.
Yeah, no, I had an old VHS player that was like built into the TV, and it was horrible because you could watch something, but you had to immediately take it out because if you let the tape sit there, it would literally like eat the tape. Like it would, like the film strip, like all the strip from the VHS tape would like fall out and it would get stuck.
Yeah, like cassettes did quite often.
I ruined like 3 VHS tapes because of that, I think. Yeah, no, like I guess with the DC stuff and other comic book related things like Guardians, like did you ever have to get like a breakdown as to how the character was in the comics or things like that, or did you ever like look into the comics later, or was it just like you just wanted to play the character?
Well, at first I play the character because it's often a new incarnation, sometimes a new canon. When we did Guardians of the Galaxy, I was cast before Dave Bautista because there's so much advanced time needed to do animation. And we did way before the series. I was doing guest roles as Drax for like 2-3 years before that. So, you know, they would tell me about the character, and I kind of got a sense that he was, you know, just not really able to process if it wasn't factual. It didn't make sense to him, and sort of played him really deadpan. And I was lucky. It worked out. You know, they tried different characters for the different other characters. They tried different people. I was the only one that started with the original guest shots and ended up on the series. You know, Michael Clark Duncan was originally going to be Groot.
Right, yeah.
And he did some recordings and was in a couple of shorts, but of course he left us. So we got Kevin, and Kevin was fantastic.
Yeah, because I remember, I think Star-Lord was originally Chris Cox, and then they went
with
Will Friedle later.
Both did great jobs. Chris did a great job. Will did a great job. Will's and also the nicest guy in the world. I find most of the people I work with, there's not a lot of complaints. Pretty mellow personalities.
Yeah, no, because I met Will at a convention a couple years ago, and we talked about Transformers for a bit when I met him, because I'm a really big fan of his Bumblebee in Prime and Robots in Disguise.
Yeah, good for him for getting that. It's surprising he didn't end up in the movie, but I mean, that's at a higher pay level than me to decide those things.
Yeah, and also usually when they do movies or things like that, they want to try to make the cast different normally when they do like film productions.
Oh yeah, I know. Like they're doing a Flash movie, and I don't know if Grodd is in it. No one's talked to me about it. They might cast a celebrity if they have him at all. Who knows? Don't know. I've not heard.
I guess what was the process with doing Grodd? Because the Grodd's a character who doesn't really like move his mouth, or at least he didn't. I don't think he did.
He still doesn't. He still doesn't. I was
gonna say I don't think he does still. But...
Well, they don't have performance capture for that because it's too expensive. Performance capture stages cost $150,000 a day to book. So maybe they're cheaper now, but a few years ago they were. So it's way cheaper just to do it in the computer. So they got a guy on set who's a stand-in, I would say. I think they call him a stand-in or a stunt performer. And he's on stilts. So he's really tall. And they have him in a gorilla costume, and they have like a couple of reference points on him. That's mostly for the actors, so they have something to look up to. And he knows the lines. He says all the lines. And then various different ways of doing it over the years. Sometimes I'll get to see him on set doing that, and then we replace his dialogue. Or they just send it to me animated, which is quite often what I get, like partially animated with the cast. Quite often the same week that they perform, if not the day after, or 2 days after. And then I voice it in Los Angeles, and they perform it in Vancouver.
Yeah, because I had been wondering what the process was for a character that doesn't really have a mouth movement, so I didn't really know if there was a different process for that, especially on a bigger live action production as opposed to like an animated thing.
Well, they have it on screen, and we make sure that it times out properly. For the last episode I did last season called Grodd Friended Me, the producer wanted to try something new, something I had wanted to explore years earlier, but they weren't interested. They finally decided to do it. All the other actors, when they were channeling Grodd, Grodd was controlling them, you would hear their voice, but you also hear my voice underneath. So it was a very challenging episode because we had to match the speech patterns of all the various actors. And I would just adjust my performance for each one, and we would go through until it was right.
Oh, and that's the thing you wanted to do originally, or that's?
Oh, I had suggested it, but it wasn't really thought of as, they didn't want to. I thought it would be interesting to have Grodd, when they speak as Grodd, when Grodd takes them over, that there's a little bit of Grodd voice underneath, so the audience is really clear that they're being taken over by Grodd. And the newest executive producing team decided that was a good idea. So I don't know if they took my idea, but I have a feeling they had thought of it on their own. And I was really happy we did. I think it turned out really well.
Right, yeah, and then Grodd's been in a couple other things. I think he was in Justice League Action.
Yeah, it was a different Grodd. It was for kids, for sure, much more comedic. And I got to do a couple episodes of that. And he was in Legends of Tomorrow as well, as the same Grodd. It was a crazy, wacky things going on. He went back in time and tried to attack Obama in college.
I was gonna say that's a really famous out of context clip that goes around on Twitter every so often.
I've seen it, and people are like, "What? They produced they don't even know where it's from." And then I chime in and go, "Well, this is what we did." And it was fun. It was funny. At the time, I thought we would get really slammed for it, but we didn't.
Yeah, no, I love that clip so much because every so often that makes the rounds on Twitter as like an out of context clip, and it like gets like 20,000 likes and retweets and stuff like that. And it just, I don't know, it always makes me laugh seeing that clip with no context.
Well, now that you're mentioning it, I might put that on my website and just sort of tell the story. It might be a fun story to tell. And I really hope someday, I mean, I'd love to anyway, but if I could meet President Obama, I hope that he knows about it. It'd be fun to talk about it.
Oh man, I'd be shocked if a ton of people like didn't send it to him on Twitter or things like that. I'd be surprised if he hadn't at least known about it.
Who knows? Well, maybe someday I'll get to find out. If you're listening, President Obama, send me a note.
I mean, with things like Guardians, like, have you actually met Batista, or has there never really been any connection like since then?
They've tried so hard to get us together. We were at Comic Con. We were at Comic Con in San Diego, feet away from each other, but they couldn't figure out the security. Because when somebody's that famous, they get mobbed at a place like Comic Con. I saw Will Smith once at Comic Con. He had like 12 guys around him, like so that nobody could like attack him or come up to him. And just to get Batista over to my booth, Dave, they just couldn't figure out how to do it. So they didn't bring him over, and they didn't want me in the Marvel booth for some reason. They didn't want me there. Anyway, we've tried a couple times. I'm pretty sure he knows who I am, and we have a mutual friend, so maybe someday. I hope to meet him. We never have.
Well, yeah, because I've seen some celebrities at Comic-Con. It's legit like presidential level security some of those people have. Like I've seen, I think there was an old picture of Tom Cruise at Comic-Con, and there were like 9 people behind him. There's all security guards, just all standing behind him.
Well, what they did with Will Smith is they formed like a box around him, and they moved with him.
So they did do the presidential thing where they they formed like a circle around him.
And they were all in black suits with sunglasses on. It was very weird. The only time I've seen it like no security, which I think was a huge mistake, but it worked out okay. When Guardians of the Galaxy first came out as the movie, that summer, I was at Comic-Con, and our cartoon hadn't been talked about yet, so we couldn't even mention it. But I was just signing about other things. And I was with some Power Rangers, which are at every convention. There's always a Power Ranger around. And the Guardians of the Galaxy cast came out in their wardrobe, and the entire convention just everybody moved over. About 10,000 people were surrounding them, and I'm not even exaggerating. They were up on a stage, and it was so jammed with people. I kind of looked over at one of the Power Rangers and I said, "If we wanted to get out of here now, we couldn't, could we?" They go, no way. So I think because of that, the year afterwards, they changed the way the Comic-Con layout was so that some of the bigger things weren't all in the same place.
So was this near like one of the stages, or was this like more like down in the vendors area where this happened?
It was fairly close to a vendors area, but it was like a mini stage. It wasn't a huge stage.
Okay.
It wasn't meant to accommodate that many people. But it all worked out. Nobody died, so we're good.
If there's a fire, if there was a fire, nobody was getting out of that room.
Oh, that's what we said. We said if there's the fire marshal would never allow it. There's a fire. Oh well. Luckily there wasn't. But that wasn't the scariest Comic-Con I've ever done. It was somewhere in Texas. It was in an old abandoned school, and we had the library or something. Like it was just a small Comic-Con. But Frank Welker was there. There is no Frank. No, Peter Cullen was there. There is no small Comic-Con with Peter Cullen there. So can you imagine like a wing of a school? A grade school. We're in the library. The line for Peter Cullen is all the way down the entire wing and out the door. And I've got my booth in there, and I'm getting people after they see him. So they're coming over to me next. But he's there, and I was able to slip through security and get a picture with him, which was awesome. He says, "Come on, David," because he didn't remember who I was. So, but that was awful. But that was scary because there was no exit. There was no door. There was no window. I don't know how we would have gotten out of there, but it all worked out.
So was it like a gymnasium, or like was it like?
No, it was a library.
Oh,
it was an old library.
I was gonna say, like with Peter, I would think like they would put him like near a gym or something with the amount of people they'd probably get. Like
sometimes cons don't realize who they have. They don't really understand what they've done to themselves.
There's a con in Atlanta I go to all the time. I've gone every year. Well, not the last 2 years because they haven't had it. But, called MomoCon. It's the same venue where they have Dragon Con in Atlanta. Okay. And I remember the second year they came up with this idea to like you got a ticket, and if you wanted to go see someone, you would get like a specific ticket for their time, and it was basically like a reservation ticket. Like it was like to assure you had a place in the line. And the line for the ticket booth, like just to get the reservations, went from the vendors hall area all the way to the stage, like the auditorium.
Do it online, guys. Do it online.
Oh yeah, it was like because that whole building that they held it in takes up like 4 blocks, like 3 or 4 blocks, and so the whole downstairs area, it was like a 5-block line going all the way down the.
That's
downstairs.
not happy for anybody. It's not fun for anybody. Well, when William Shatner shows up, you ever seen William Shatner show up at a convention?
Oh yeah, I went to GalaxyCon in Raleigh a couple years ago, and he was there.
He needs his own wing. He has to have his own room.
Say, because I remember I saw George Takei a couple years ago, and he was also one that had a very, very, very long line.
Well, people want to see the older guys. They want to make sure they see them.
Right. No, actually, with the Guardians thing, it reminds me. It's weird you brought the Power Ranger, because there's a story I had at that same convention that kind of coincides with Guardians and Power Rangers, because Michael Rooker was there, and Jason David Frank, who was the original Green Ranger in Mighty Morphin, was there. And I remember they both showed up at about the same time. Jason had been there for like 5 minutes, and his line was huge because he's like the most famous Power Rangers actor. And his line was huge, and Michael Rooker's line was huge, and they were about 4 booths apart from each other in the autograph area. And I remember Rooker came out, and Jason David Frank like jokingly yelled at him because like his whole crowd was cheering, and Michael Rooker like ran over to him, and they like had a fake fist fight, like in the autograph booth.
Oh yeah, you want to do stuff like that? It's fun.
Yeah. They like had like a fake fist fight, and then they for like a good minute or two.
Yeah, we get into some funny things sometimes at fan conventions. You know, sometimes like, somebody got out a ukulele once. I just started like bantering away while I'm signing autographs. That was fun. Or like I was in New Zealand and it was Easter, and I was singing like I was with Mick Wingert, if you know who he is.
Oh
yeah. He works a lot on Kung Fu Panda, and I was going, "Here comes Peter Cottontail, hopping down the bunny trail." And of course, everyone's looking at me like I'm an alien. It's New Zealand. They don't know what I'm doing. They've never heard of that song. I'm singing in a weird accent. And I thought it was, and I couldn't stop doing it. I was just, and Mick's like, "Stop." It was fun.
Was this at the convention, or was this when you guys were like out?
No, it was at Armageddon. It was at the convention.
Okay.
But it was Easter morning. That's why.
I guess going back with the production like The Flash or things like that, when working on Bumblebee, I guess what was that like a different production as opposed to like working on like a normal TV production with a movie as big as something like Bumblebee? Was that like a different type of voice production?
Very different, because it's got an enormous screen there that usually most TV shows are, other than Grodd, other than The Flash, you're doing the voice first. It's called prelay animation. So they animate to you. So it's like a little radio play. But in this case, they have the scene mostly done. And, we're inserting dialogue. And also, it's an enormous screen. And you have to remember, people are watching this on a 70-foot screen in a big theater. And the performance has to match that. Now, I can never be that big as a human being. There's a lot of enhancements that they give you, of course. They're processing your voice within an inch of its life. They didn't even do a lot of processing on mine, except to, they have to make it sound dynamic and fit all the speakers, of course, the stereo components and all that. But yeah, sometimes we would spend an entire session on 1 or 2 lines just to finesse them. I think I did like 5 sessions on that. And Travis Knight was the director. And to have the actual director of the movie was really thrilling. Usually you get the post-production supervisor, and it's sort of an afterthought. But he really cared. So we made sure we finessed it. And it was definitely exhausting, but worth it. The first line was so screamy, I was feeling a little bit faint after we would do that. Because I had to. Did you think you could hide? Is the first line. Did you think you could hide?
Like, yeah.
Yeah, it was super screamy. So we really just did that for 1 session.
Well, just that one line?
Yeah.
Wow. Because I remember Tom Kenny had a great story working with Michael Bay, because I know he produced Bumblebee, but yeah, I assume he wasn't there in the voice production, most likely.
No.
Yeah, and I remember Michael Bay was voice directing Tom Kenny, and I remember Tom had told me that Michael Bay is the fastest director you will ever work with.
Oh yeah,
like fastest voice, because he said like I think I found it interesting because Tom was just like a lot of takes in the Transformers movies were one take, like they were like 1-2 take lines, like in the Transformers films.
Not with Travis. We spent our time. Well, you know what? I admire him for that. He wanted it to be absolutely crafted, not thrown away, and that was great. I'm glad that he did that for the fans.
Yeah, because I just remember Tom was just like, Michael Bay would either be two things. He would either be he heard the first line and he loved it, or he would have to do it 30 times.
Oh, like, no in between.
Yeah, there was no there was no in between. Either he loved the first take or he loved the 30th take. There was no in between with him.
That's what Robocop was like.
Really?
Yeah, we do it quickly, or it would be sitting there all day trying to get one line the way he wanted it.
Mm. Who was in charge of the Robocop production? Or at least
I see his face. This is a Canadian director. Sorry, man, I don't remember right now. Doug Parker. I do. Doug Parker was the director, the voice director.
Okay, yeah, I've heard Doug Parker. Yeah, I've heard of Doug Parker's name. I know he's done a lot of voiceover and direction in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember him from he was Pterosaur in Beast Wars. That's the thing I was trying to remember what he did.
So many of us in Vancouver worked on that show, and now what is it, the 25th anniversary, something like that?
Yeah, 25th this year, which I guess that's the reason why they announced that new Transformers movie coming out next year is going to be a Beast Wars crossover film. So
yeah, I had a lot of fans like, oh, cast the original cast. I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome. I don't think it's going to happen, but go for it.
I feel like there'd probably be some weird contract stuff, given that'd be a Vancouver cast and an LA cast.
No, nothing. No, that's not a problem at all.
Oh.
They'll figure it. They would figure that out. But it's just, they're going to want to use celebrities. Let's face it. I mean, I'm not saying for sure, but that's probably what's going to happen.
I mean, Transformers has been pretty consistent with voice actors and character actors with the movies. So,
well, they'll cast Peter. I know they've already announced they're casting Peter in that movie, so I know he always gets the part. Frank doesn't always get the part, but oftentimes he does.
Yeah, lately he's because Hugo Weaving doesn't want to do it anymore, so Frank's been primarily doing it for the movies. So, because usually Transformers is like one of the surprising big box office movies where I'm actually really shocked they do still consistently get voice actors for the Transformers.
Of course they do. Yeah, there's a lot of younger actors who would love to be on that show.
Because it's
that franchise.
It's that or it's character actors. Because I know they confirmed Ron Perlman's going to be Optimus Primal in the movie.
Right.
Which, I mean,
I've only heard those two.
I was going to say, to be fair, Ron Perlman's also done a shit ton of voice acting. Like, a lot. I was going to say.
He's good. He's good, too.
I was going to say, I have no problem with Ron Perlman. I have zero problems with Ron Perlman. I was going to say, like, I've always... What is the perspective? Because I've actually always wanted to know this from some voice actors, because I know a lot of voice actors are very on, like, celebrity casting. Like, A-list celebrity casting for animated projects.
You know what? They're going to cast who they're going to cast. And when I get in these things, it's their house. They're inviting me to be a guest in their house. And how lucky am I? I can't get upset when anybody gets cast. It's an opportunity when I get a chance. And whatever happens, happens. I have no control over it. And I understand they can go on talk shows. They can help much better with the publicity than I can. I had a plane flight once with the booker for Conan O'Brien. He would book all of his talent, and he goes, because we were talking for a bit, he goes, I would love to have you on the show, but they would never book you in a million years. Because nobody knows my face. And that's what I'm also saying. They're like, to convention bookers, it's like, promote my characters. I don't care. It's okay if they don't. I don't have to show my face and my name and be famous, quote unquote. My characters are famous. And the fans are there because of my characters, and I'm just the guy that does the character. Well, I'm happy to go along for the ride, but advertise my characters. Ooh, the voice of Shockwave is going to be here, if that's a big thing for their fans. Don't say David Sobolov is going to be here, because that probably eliminates 50% of the people who come and see me. I'll always get people go, I didn't know you were going to be here, because they advertise my name a lot. It's like, well, you're Grodd? I didn't know you were going to be here. Well, because they didn't advertise Grodd. They advertised Sobolov.
Right, yeah. Because conventions can be weird like that, because I've been to some conventions where they don't advertise the work at all. They'll say like one thing, but they won't say like anything else.
That especially doesn't work for me. If you look at my IMDb, I have so many different fandoms. I've got small little groups of fandoms and all the different things I've done, and it's really good just to say, here's. I have a collage now that has all the major ones, and I think that's what they should be showing. Then you get like the top 10. But I'm fine with whatever happens at a convention. But if a fan would like to meet me and didn't know I was there, it's kind of disappointing for all of us.
Right? Yeah, because I mean, it's one of those things where I love when I go to those areas and I see the banner and it just has like 30 characters on it, because I don't know, I just think it's nice to see when they have basically like all their most famous roles just on one big thing right behind them, as opposed to just one famous character.
I'm doing that now. I used to do the 30 things. I don't do that anymore. I literally go with what sells at the conventions, because I don't know how popular my characters are, really. I don't know. But when I go to a convention, the people that talk to me about the characters the most, those go to the front of the pile. And then about once a year, I redo that banner, and it has the ones people ask for most. Right now, it's surprising, but Dr. Fate has really been holding in there. Over the years, it's been 5 years since Injustice 2. They're just coming out with this week with an action figure of Dr. Fate specifically from Injustice 2 5 years later. I can't believe it.
I was gonna say, I know they're also doing an Injustice animated movie, because I think they announced that that's coming out. I don't know if it's this year.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
I think it's coming this year. I think it's coming out in like November or something like that.
They probably would have. Well, they might do the casting this summer, but it's probably already done. I haven't heard of it.
Well, yeah, because they just had Batman Long Halloween just came out like a month ago, and the actress who played Catwoman passed away like back in like July. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I feel like they probably already recorded that like a year ago, most likely.
Cool. No worries. Whatever anyone wants to give me, I'm happy to take.
I mean, because they also haven't confirmed the cast, which I find interesting. So we don't know if it's going to be the game cast or if it's going to be like a new cast.
Yeah, even if I knew, I couldn't tell you.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm not
all
saying
my NDAs, yeah.
So, David, are you in the movie?
I'll get a lot of interviews that ask that. It's like, I'd love to tell you, but NDA.
Oh yeah, no, I don't like.
They don't fool around with those. Well, they don't fool around with those anyway. You get in a lot of trouble for breaking NDAs.
Yeah, no, I don't like prying at people with things that I know. It's like, hey, so are you in this thing that's coming out in a month, or like this thing that's coming out in 2 years? Like,
when they cast you in a show, the marketing people follow your social media. They're watching, and I had my social media open. I think it was my Facebook, so that people could post. And I was in a project once, it was a video game, and where we were on camera. And somebody posted a picture from the set on my timeline. And it wasn't even 5 minutes after it was posted that I got a call from the executive producer of the game. David, what did you do? It's like, I didn't do anything. It was open. They remove it, and we will talk to them.
Oh, yeah, no, who did I talk to? Like a few years ago, I remember they had a similar story like that, where I think they took a photo in their booth, and I think they accidentally didn't realize that like part of the script was behind them or something like that. Like you couldn't.
Oh yeah, well, that used to happen a lot with Marvel. They were starting to ban pictures from inside the booth because that was happening, and we had this great producer, Amanda, and she's still around at Nickelodeon. She's fantastic, but she's getting really strict about it, which she should have. Because you don't want that stuff leaked. One of our producers of Guardians of the Galaxy was Court Lane, And he said, David, Marvel is in the excitement business. We deal with excitement. You deal with the character. And, it's their business to market. It's their business to decide when things are released so that they can get maximum impact and not spoil things. And you have to trust them with that. It's not up to an actor to decide when they want to release information about a show.
Right, yeah, because the most intimidating interview I ever did was Matt Vogel, the guy who currently does Kermit and Big Bird.
Mm-hmm.
And it was intimidating for that, but it was more intimidating for the thing of Matt told me, here's this woman is going to be here. She's part of the advertising firm at Disney, and she's here to make sure I don't say anything wrong. I'm like,
yep.
Okay.
They'll do that sometimes.
So,
or they'll, if you have somebody like that, if you have part of the marketing department with you, they'll say, stop tape, erase that. If they have to. But you know what? When I'm on a big show, they give us talking points. I'm pretty open with what I say within that, but also I just make sure I respect the franchise. You never want to say anything negative about the franchise because you don't bite the hand that feeds you, and you want to be part of the team, and that includes marketing the project. But also, they release things when they want to, so that's up to them, and I respect that too. I don't need to send. Yeah, and spoilers are stupid anyway. Because it's like you get 1 minute of joy, and then you've destroyed the joy for thousands of people.
Yeah, no, I just remember the intimidation of that because I was just like, I'm talking to Kermit the Frog, but there's someone that works from Disney sitting in the room with me to make sure I don't say anything wrong. Like,
yeah, it never bothered me. They're always very nice.
Oh no, she was very nice. It was just the fact that there was a representative from one of the most powerful media conglomerates in the world sitting in the room with me, like while I was talking to this person.
Well, when you're in the bigger cities, of course, working on this stuff, you get used to that.
I guess interesting thing I've always wanted to. I like asking voice actors in particular. I was like, do you ever have like a role that has really stuck with you? I guess not necessarily a favorite role, but like what's like the one role that you think about a lot in your career
that I've already played? Well, yeah. The pat answer to that question is I love all my children equally, but the real answer would be there's a couple of shows that I really like that not a lot of people got to see, and I wish they had. There's a show called Kaijudo. If anyone knows that or wants to look it up, I played this character called Tatsurian, and he was a fantastic character and a really great show. But it was on the Hub Network. Only about half the country got that. People were watching Transformers Prime because they really wanted to see it, but Kaijudo, a lot of people didn't see it. I talked to people in the department where they track viewership, and they said 1 week I went down, they said only 36,000 people watch it, which is like a fraction of what a cat video would get. So it would be nice if people went out and looked up Kaijudo. I think they'd enjoy it. So that's one of my favorite characters that no one got to see. And Grodd is one of my favorites. The one in Bumblebee's character that I played, Blitzwing, was really great. I love being in films. I worked with Robert Rodriguez on Alita, Battle Angel. And just so fun. I was even in something uncredited years ago. I always forget, was the TV show Firefly in the movie Serenity?
Yeah, Serenity was the movie and Firefly was the show.
Yeah, I was in Serenity, playing one of the Reavers, one of the villains, along with Fred Tatasciore. And they had 18 of us there the night that President Bush won the second time. And, there was election night. And 18 of us in there, and they were super nice, got us lots of soothing things for our throat. And we just walked around and screamed all night. We went through the whole picture and found where the Reavers were, and sometimes we do individual lines, sometimes we do groups, and then it became part of history because that franchise to me was always very special.
So was that was like 18 of you all in a room just doing creature noises and stuff like that?
And they had so many of us because it was so vocally taxing that if we needed to drop out for 15 minutes, it was okay.
And that was an uncredited role, or was that like?
Yeah, that was uncredited because it was just background, really.
Yeah,
But
so
it was specific to the Reaver.
yeah.
I've done a lot of Star Wars movies too, and I'm listed as additional voices, but I'd have to like point out where I am.
Is it like I assume the newer Star Wars movies?
Yeah, Solo and Rogue One, kind of stuff. Those movies.
Yeah. I assume was that like background aliens, or was that like just like additional
Oh, all
lore in the
sorts of different,
background?
some individual lines, all sorts of different stuff. In Solo, there were these rusted out robots, like a trio of robots, and I played all three of them.
Hmm.
It's memorable, but only if you like point it out. It's like, oh, here I'm coming up, there I am.
What is, I guess with uncredited stuff, like how does uncredited things work? Do they just tell you that it's not going to be credited work, or is it like that just happens later in production?
Well, sometimes I mean, years later, I talk about it. I don't talk about it right away, but what else have I worked on? Darren Aronofsky film for Paramount. It was a religious film. Yeah, I was in Noah. I was Frank Langella's voice match. But that's not credited, but you'll hear me in there. You won't know it's me because I'm supposed to sound exactly like him.
So is there just like a couple lines that they just wanted you to like dub over, or were there just
Well, I did some background stuff there, but also sometimes he wasn't available. And you'll hear me interspersed throughout the movie. You won't know that it's me. Sometimes it was small little things because that particular movie had religious groups wanting to see it. They wanted to kind of keep religious groups happy, but Darren Aronofsky was also fighting for cut on the movie. So there'd be a Darren Aronofsky cut, there'd be the studio cut, and then there'd be the religious cut. So there were so many redos needed that Frank Langella wasn't going to go in there every 5 minutes to redo that stuff. So they would just call me to do it, and I was more than happy to.
Yeah. I guess with something like small roles, is that just like a 10-minute session or something like that, or are you actually there?
Oh, not always. Sometimes I was there for a while.
Mm.
There was one though. The shortest session I ever had was for Noah. I had done a session in the afternoon, and it was just crunch time. It was like right before they were going to lock the picture, and they just needed to know where I was at all times. So you couldn't even go through my agent because it was like they would call me in the evening or whatever. So Friday night, I'm in another city visiting my sister.
Oh, no.
I told them I'm flying out this afternoon. I'm going to be away. So just so you know, if you need me, let me know. So they call me 8:00 at night, and we need you to do a scene. I'm like, I'm just going to go into a play now. Can I do it afterwards? They said, as long as we get it before midnight. I said, can I just like rent a studio tomorrow morning? Nope, you got to do it tonight. So it was just into my iPad, and they paid me for a session, and all I said was, Methuselah. I did it 3 times. That was the session. Methuselah. Very similar to Grodd. Very similar to Grodd.
I was gonna say, yeah, that sounded a lot like Grodd.
Grodd ate banana.
I remember Greg Berger had a story about how when he was working on Duckman back in the 90s, he was like filming a movie in Russia. I think like he was like in Russia, like shooting for a live action production, and they had him record all his dialogue on a tape recorder. From how I know the story, he recorded all his audio on a tape recorder for most of the first season, I think, and he just mailed it to them, and they used all that audio.
Mailed it to them. Mailed it to them?
Yeah.
That's funny. I love that show. What a great show. Didn't he play like the pig detective?
Yeah, he was corn-fed. He like
he was so good.
Most of the first season was all recorded on a tape recorder when he was in Russia when he did that.
That's funny. He's never told me that story. That's funny. Greg introduced me to the ways of the convention. I went to my very first convention with him there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a banner. I didn't even have pictures to sign. I didn't know. And he likes, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And he got me into it. And now my booth looks like I'm in Vegas. Because I got the banner and I've got the table throw and the pop-ups for different shows. And on all the pictures. I have a really good friend that does my design, really good friend that does my printing. So it's fairly inexpensive and really well done. So I pretty much every character that I do, I have a picture for. Anything that's been of any note. So I must have like 40 pictures now of different characters. Trying to decide, I need to start doing fan surveys. Like, mostly it's people bring me stuff now. Like 80, not 80, but maybe 65, 70% of sales are just things that people bring me. But I kind of want to know, like, do they want just a picture of the character? Do they want them in an action pose? Do they want it? Because now my pictures, I'll say, like, the voice of Grodd, David Sobolov. They'll have my name on it. Would they rather not have my name on it? So I got to put that out there and like do a survey on Twitter or something and find out what people want. Adjust. I haven't really adjusted the way I do things in 10 years. It's time for an upgrade.
Yeah, because usually for me, I'm not really an autograph person. I usually just prefer getting a picture with people normally. Because I don't know, it feels more special to me when you get a picture with someone than just getting an autograph.
Yeah, well, I'm finding that people want the experience. They want to meet me and talk to me or any of us, and the signature is like a souvenir of them meeting us. Because you'll sell way more at a convention than you will online because they want to meet you.
Oh yeah, no, I can't even count the amount of people I've talked to for like 5 minutes at conventions, like 4 or 5 minutes. It's like Maurice LaMarche and Rob Paulson and some of the people from Steven Universe, just tons of people.
Yeah, it's a great way to meet up. There's one that I remember meeting, his name was Bobby, I forget his last name. He was in the Gorn suit in Star Trek in the 60s.
Really?
And I don't think he's with us anymore, but he was a few years ago at a convention. And I bought a picture from him because I played a Gorn, the reboot of his character in Star Trek Enterprise. So it was really cool to get his Gorn picture signed. And he wrote from one Gorn to another. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Bobby Clark is his name.
Yeah, Bobby Clark.
It says he's still alive from what I'm reading.
Oh, good. I'm glad he is. I know that he had cancer. I'm glad he made it. Good for him.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing, it says he's still alive. So
good. Well, you get to see who's around the convention circuit anyway, but this year we sure haven't. I just went to one in Dallas. First one in a year and a half.
Yeah, there's a convention, GalaxyCon, which I've gone to like a couple years, but they're doing it again this year, and I'm just like, I don't know if I want to go. I still probably want to wait like a year if I'm going to go to a convention again, honestly.
Whatever people are comfortable with. I never argue it. I'm not into the politics of it. It's like, you want to wear a mask? Wear a mask. You want to be around a crowd? Great. You don't?
Yeah. I'm
not going to have a discussion about it.
I still feel weird being around a big, isolated group of people, I guess. So.
Yeah, then don't. Whatever makes you feel safe.
So yeah, but I just got to say thank you so much for doing this.
Well, you're welcome.
I got to say one more question: is there any advice you could give people that are interested in getting into the industry?
Learn how to act. It's not about doing funny voices. Stay humble. Remember where you came from, and just don't lose yourself in it. If things start going really well for you, you're no more important than anybody else. Just be nice. Always nice to people. But yeah, you got to learn how to act and train. Back in the day, we would go to acting schools. Most people don't do that anymore. Find people working in the business. I'm a voice teacher and demo producer as well, but me or someone else who's actually working in the business rather than like a cookie cutter studio. You need demos to go to agencies, and it's a progression, just go one step at a time, and don't be so hard on yourself that it all has to happen tomorrow. It'll happen when it happens. Just be good at what you do. And then when the opportunity's there, you'll be ready for it.